South Carolina, the Palmetto State. Hello and welcome to my channel. Today, we're looking at South Carolina. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, hit that subscribe button. What is now South Carolina has been inhabited by humans for thousands of years. Archaeological evidence suggests that Paleo-Indians were living in South Carolina as early as 8000 BC. These nomadic hunters and gatherers were followed by the Woodland Period people who began to farm and live in permanent settlements around 1000 BC. By the time Europeans arrived in the 16th century, the area was inhabited by several Native American tribes, including the Cherokee, the Catawba, the Yuchi, the Shuan, and the Iroquois. They lived in small villages and relied on agriculture and trade with other tribes for their survival. The first European to explore South Carolina was the Spanish explorer Alonso de Santa Cruz in 1524. He landed near present-day Charleston and claimed the area for Spain. However, Spain did not attempt to settle the area at that time, and the native tribes continued to thrive. In 1629, King Charles I of England granted a charter to a group of English settlers led by Sir Robert Heath to establish a colony in South Carolina. The colony was named Carolina in honor of Charles I's wife, Queen Henrietta Maria. The first English settlement in South Carolina was at the mouth of the Ashley River in 1630. However, the colony struggled due to a lack of funding and the threat of attacks from the Spanish in Florida. In 1631, the colony was abandoned and the settlers moved to a new location near present-day Charleston. This settlement, which became known as Charlestown, eventually grew into the state's largest city. Despite these early setbacks, the Carolina colony continued to grow and develop throughout the 17th century. In 1670, the English began to explore and settle the western part of the province, which was rich in natural resources, such as timber and fertile land. The fur trading industry also boomed during this period, attracting settlers from England and other European colonies. During this time, slavery began to take root in the Carolina colony. The first enslaved Africans arrived in 1629 and were used primarily for labor-intensive tasks such as farming. As the colony grew, so did the demand for labor, and the number of enslaved people brought to South Carolina increased significantly. By the end of the 17th century, enslaved people made up a significant portion of the population in South Carolina. In 1719, South Carolina officially became a province of the British Empire, separate from the colony of North Carolina. This allowed South Carolina to develop its own unique identity and government. The capital was moved to Columbia in 1786. As the 18th century progressed, South Carolina's economy grew increasingly dependent on the cultivation of cash crops such as rice, indigo, and cotton. These crops were highly profitable and contributed to the growth of plantation agriculture in the southern part of the province. At the same time, the northern part of the province developed a more diversified economy with small farms, manufacturing, and trade. However, the prosperity of South Carolina was built on the backs of enslaved Africans, whose labor was essential to the success of the plantation economy. Despite facing brutal conditions and the denial of basic rights, enslaved people in South Carolina resisted their oppression through various means, including running away, destroying property, and revolting. In 1776, South Carolina became one of the original 13 colonies to declare independence from Britain and join the United States. The state played a significant role in the American Revolutionary War, with many battles taking place on its soil. South Carolina's diverse population, including settlers from England, Scotland, Ireland, and Africa, contributed to the Patriot cause, which aimed to create a new nation based on principles of liberty and self-government. The contributions of enslaved people to the war effort were significant, but often overlooked. Many enslaved people fought alongside Patriot forces, providing essential support and skills that helped secure victory. Following the war, South Carolina became a state admitted to the Union in 1788. During the early years of the United States, South Carolina's economy continued to grow due to the expansion of agriculture and trade. The state's geographic location on the Atlantic coast made it a strategic hub for shipping and commerce. South Carolina's major cities, including Charleston and Columbia, became centers of economic activity, connecting the state to national and international markets. However, as the 19th century approached, the issue of slavery became increasingly divisive in South Carolina. The state's economy was heavily reliant on enslaved labor, and many wealthy landowners saw the institution of slavery as essential to their way of life and economic prosperity. Meanwhile, abolitionists in the northern part of the state began to question the morality and sustainability of slavery and called for its eventual end. This growing tension between the pro-slavery and anti-slavery factions would eventually lead to the Secession Crisis in 1860. When Abraham Lincoln was elected president, South Carolina became the first state to secede from the Union on December 20, 1860. The Secession Crisis was the result of decades of escalating tensions over the expansion of slavery into Western territories. As the United States grew, the question of whether new states should be admitted as slave or free states became a contentious issue. Southerners feared that the growing population in the northern states would eventually outnumber them in the federal government and lead to the end of slavery. They also believed that the federal government had an obligation to protect their way of life, which was deeply rooted in the institution of slavery. South Carolina's decision to secede triggered a series of similar moves by other southern states, ultimately leading to the formation of the Confederate States of America. The state's leaders, including Jefferson Davis, Alexander Stephens, and John C. Calhoun, argued that secession was necessary to preserve the institution of slavery and protect the rights of the southern states. During the Civil War, South Carolina experienced significant devastation. The state was the site of numerous battles, including the First Battle of Bull Run, which took place near Manassas, Virginia, and the Siege of Charleston, which resulted in the bombardment of Fort Sumter. The war's heavy toll on the state's economy and infrastructure left South Carolina devastated. Following the Civil War, South Carolina faced the monumental task of rebuilding its economy and society. The end of slavery brought significant changes to the state's labor force and agricultural system. Former enslaved people were now free, but they faced significant challenges in transitioning to a new life. Many continued to work on plantations as sharecroppers or tenant farmers, while others migrated to urban areas in search of new opportunities. In the aftermath of the Civil War, South Carolina underwent a significant political transformation with the passage of the 15th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which granted African American men the right to vote. This amendment aimed to ensure equal voting rights regardless of race. However, in practice, African Americans in South Carolina and other southern states faced intense discrimination and violence, which effectively limited their access to the ballot box. Southern states implemented various tactics such as poll taxes, literacy tests, and intimidation to prevent African Americans from voting. Throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries, South Carolina was marked by racial segregation and discrimination. The state's political system continued to be dominated by white leadership, and African Americans were largely excluded from positions of power and influence. Segregation became deeply ingrained in society, with separate facilities and services for white and black citizens. In the mid-20th century, the civil rights movement emerged as a major force for change in South Carolina and the rest of the South, led by activists like Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. The movement sought to end racial segregation and discrimination and secure equal rights and opportunities for African Americans. Through nonviolent protests, legal challenges, and political activism, the movement made significant progress in dismantling Jim Crow laws and promoting racial integration in public spaces, education, and employment. But the struggle for civil rights was met with resistance from those who sought to maintain the status quo. Acts of violence and intimidation were used to suppress the movement, but it ultimately led to landmark legislation such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. which outlawed discrimination based on race and ensured the right to vote for African Americans. In the latter half of the 20th century, South Carolina continued to grapple with issues related to race and equality. While significant progress had been made, persistent disparities and incidents of racial tension highlighted the ongoing need for dialogue and reconciliation. The state's history of slavery and segregation left a lasting impact on its social and economic landscape. Efforts to address these issues and promote racial harmony continued into the 21st century. Today, South Carolina is a diverse and dynamic state with a rich cultural heritage. Its cities, including Charleston, Columbia, and Greenville, offer vibrant cultural scenes, entertainment options, and educational institutions. South Carolina is home to several renowned universities, such as the University of South Carolina and Clemson University. The state's economy has diversified since its early reliance on agriculture. It now encompasses industries such as manufacturing, technology, and tourism. South Carolina's coastal areas are popular destinations for tourists seeking beaches and outdoor recreation. The state also has a strong military presence with several major installations, including Fort Jackson and Shaw Air Base. Looking forward, South Carolina faces challenges related to issues such as infrastructure, healthcare, and education. Addressing these issues will be crucial to ensuring the state's continued growth and prosperity. South Carolina's history has been shaped by a complex interplay of historical events, cultural influences, and the contributions of its diverse population. From its early colonial days to its role in the Civil War and the Civil Rights Movement, the state has witnessed significant transformations. As South Carolina moves forward, it carries with it a legacy that serves as a reminder of its journey toward equality, justice, and progress. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please check out one of my others. If you have a state you'd like me to cover, let me know. Good times and happy learning.